Welcome back, everyone. This is a 10 to 15 minute synopsis of the first book of Dante's Commedia, the Inferno. It'll be a good recap if you've read it and a good roadmap if you haven't. The intro video was about exile and homecoming, what it means to be lost to oneself, spiritually, politically, literally in the case of exile, and the Inferno is really the place of the lost. The souls here, or the shades, as Dante calls them, have sinned in life and failed to repent. That's the recipe for hell. Sin in life, but fail to repent. In his words, this is their second death. Their bodies have died, now their souls die. I love how Dante tells us in Canto 3, when Virgil leads him from the dark forest into hell, that he's going to see the secret things. Le segrete cose. These are the mysteries of death and the afterlife, the things that none of us can see. But for Dante, they're also just things that no one tells us, things that we should all want to learn about the way the world works, about what justice is, what love is, what sin is, what error is. The Commedia is divided into 3 books, or canticles. Each book is divided into 33 chapters, which are called cantos, with 1 additional chapter to begin the Inferno, for a total of 100. That's not accidental. Another secret thing you should know is that the entrance to hell is here. Probably not here exactly, but somewhere in Italy, on Earth. And hell itself is a vast cone burrowed into the core of the planet. It is divided, this cone, into a series of concentric circles that get smaller and smaller the further down you get. The more grievous sinners are further down towards the bottom. Now, Dante didn't think the earth was flat. No one in the Middle Ages did, but he did follow the Ptolemaic system of the universe, which put the earth at the center. So if God is at the circumference of the universe, the farthest point, then each of these infernal rings gets further and further from God. This is a guiding spatial metaphor of the Inferno. That is, a way that the literal space or landscape implies spiritual or moral significance, right? Sin takes us away from God, literally in hell and figuratively in life. It gets in our way. Lucifer is at hell's very bottom, the farthest that one can possibly get from God. Another secret of hell is that it's not designed for punishment or motivated by vengeance, though Dante sometimes uses these metaphors as kind of shorthand. Over the gate of hell is a sign, which Dante the Pilgrim sees and doesn't understand. He says its meaning is hard for him. The gate says that it was created by justice, power, wisdom, and love. Il primo amore, primal or first love. So this should tell us that we need a new idea of love if we're to understand what's going on here. If love is the creative force behind this eternal torment, we need to come up with some new definitions, including a new definition of sin. Because for Dante, sin isn't a matter of breaking the rules. Sin doesn't make God angry and send you to time out in hell. That's the parental model, not the theological one. Dante tells us that sin involves actions that cause us to lose the good of the intellect. Il ben dell'intelletto. If the good of the intellect is the faculty that makes us our best selves, most like what God desires, that's a Christian commonplace, then sin is an action that makes us less like our best selves and less like God, less human. The more we sin, the less human we make ourselves. So for instance, wrath stirs our feelings, blinds us to the world, and we act in ways that cause harm to ourselves and to others. Get angry in the car, road rage, things go out of control. It's not just harmful to people around you, it's potentially harmful to yourself. Treachery takes a crucial, divinely human connection, trust, and betrays it. Cuts us off from ourselves and from others. So this is a safe way to start rethinking sin. It's what blinds the intellect and causes suffering. Blinds the intellect and causes suffering. The Inferno is about what sin does to us, not what God does to sinners. In fact, God is nowhere to be found in the Inferno. Shades are incapable of saying his name. That's what makes hell, hell. the absence of God. There isn't an opposition party, a demonic force that rolls over hell and pushes back against God in an eternal battle of good and evil. There are some devils with pitchforks and who get into silly fights and things, but they're all gatekeepers. They're all instruments of a system that is governed by justice, not by Satan. Evil is the absence of God for Dante and for Augustine. It's the absence of the good, which is why when we reach the bottom, we'll find it frozen and silent. We are far from the warmth of divine goodness and the speech of human reason. Now, Dante's hell is divided into 9 circles, and those 9 are subdivided into 3 major categories of sin. Those categories are incontinence, violence, and fraud. Incontinence is not what you think, but it involves losing control, and it includes the sins of lust, gluttony, greed, and wrath. Further down is violence against others, violence against self, and violence against God. And finally, fraud at the very bottom, which is divided into many forms of simple fraud, and then treachery, which involves breaking that special bond of trust between 2 people. Now, if you're wondering where this schema comes from, it's actually not the 7 deadly sins, which are more important in Purgatorio. Dante is drawing from the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, not from Augustine, not from the church, not from the Bible. Hell is constructed according to Aristotelian ethical categories. So we'll need to let that simmer a bit as well. So in the second circle, we meet the adulterers. It's reasonable that they aren't as bad off as, say, the murderers whom we meet further down, further away. Remember, as you get further down, the sin gets more grievous. But in the 8th circle, we find flatterers and hypocrites and liars who are worse off than murderers. So that's a hint that we're not dealing with the common secular system of justice. The Inferno isn't a prison. It's not based on people who might be reintroduced into society one day. The Inferno is eternal. And that's something worth saying. Everyone here in hell is here forever. And here's what will break your head the more you think about it. If they could get out, they wouldn't. In some perverse way, they are exactly where they want to be. This is a bird's eye view of the Inferno, but there's no handbook or cheat sheet that Dante uses to tell us all of these things. The maps you have in your editions are very useful, by the way, but remember that they're not by Dante himself. The poet who writes the story, remember, the poet writes the story in which a pilgrim discovers these things as he goes. He talks to shades. Virgil teaches him while they're sitting around waiting for the smell to clear out. He crosses rivers of blood and excrement and pools of boiling tar. This is all part of the narrative and its frame, the fictional journey undertaken in the year 1300 when Dante gets lost in the dark wood and finds the shade of the Roman poet Virgil, who says a woman named Beatrice sent him. As Virgil guides the pilgrim downward, they meet and talk with spirits in each circle. Some are historical people like Homer or Aristotle. Some are historical contemporary people, Francesca da Rimini or Pope Nicholas III. Yes, there are popes in hell. Some are entirely fictional and mythic, like Minos, Cerberus, Odysseus, or Agamemnon. All of these real and mythical, biblical, classical, historical figures are all mixed together. Each encounter with a shade in Dante's Inferno is a vignette in which the shade is frozen in the state of sin that resulted in the damnation that they suffer. They are eternally stuck in that state. And this poses several interesting interpretive challenges for us as readers. One involves what Dante calls contrapasso, or counteraction, counterpass. Each circle has a punishment that perfectly fits the sin. That's the contrapasso. And we as readers must interpret the punishment and the landscape of each canto to think about how the sin causes suffering. Dante doesn't tell us that shades who committed suicide felt paralyzed and stuck in place. He portrays them instead transformed into gnarled and twisted trees in a sterile and frightening forest. He doesn't tell us that treachery makes us devour one another and turns our hearts to stone. Instead, he portrays those shades as frozen in ice and gnawing on one another's flesh. Yeah, it gets good down there. Another challenge of interpretation that Dante sets for us involves sympathy and judgment. The pilgrim talks to sinners, often believes them, sometimes even pities them. Is this what we as readers are meant to do? The shades sometimes lie to the pilgrim. Sometimes they tell him the truth. Sometimes they sandwich a lie between two truths, so that he and Virgil believe. Are these sinners still, in fact, deceived themselves? Are they lying to themselves? Should we as readers learn to see through their lies and withhold our compassion? Dante says the great Farinata holds hell in all disdain. He's part of hell. His disdain is part of what landed him there. Guido de Montefeltro agrees to talk to Dante because he knows it will stay secret. Surprise! It's in a poem that's being read by everyone for hundreds and hundreds of years. So as we meet each sinner, each shade, and encounter them and their narrative and their story, keep an open mind, but also a healthy suspicion about what they're telling us and what they're asking us. A related challenge is to fill in the blanks. Dante asks us to learn about history, about politics, and literature in order to rise up to these interpretive challenges. So it's really important, for instance, to know why one pope mistakes Dante when he shows up for Pope Boniface VIII in Canto 19. So you've got to go and look that up in your notes, because Dante is condemning Boniface before he's dead. It's important to know, for instance, who Bocca degli Abati was and his treacherous role during a massacre at the Battle of Monteperti in 1260. It's important to understand why Dante is so ruthless to him when he finds him in Inferno 32. So you can check your notes for these details. They really do help to unpack the scene, but don't get bogged down in them. Keep reading for now. One thing I always emphasize to students is that in order to write with such incredibly realistic detail and keen description, Dante had to imagine himself in each circle of hell, not just as a visitor. In other words, to give words to each sinner, he had to imagine himself as that sinner, which means composing each encounter meant that he had to face his own real potential for committing the worst sins imaginable. Here's another dark place in myself. Let me sit here for a while and get really comfortable with it. Oh, here's another really dark place. Let's see what this one yields. The Inferno is a compelling and exciting story, but it's also a hall of mirrors for Dante, who must have had to summon all of his imaginative courage to write himself into each punishment, and finally into the frozen, icy pit at the bottom. Yes, as I mentioned before, that's right. Dante's hell is actually frozen over. That's where Lucifer is, and what terrifying mysteries he keeps, his secret things, I'll leave you to discover.